Morning, Ranger.
Morning.
Could you introduce yourself to your?
I'm Michael Adcock.
Did you have occasion to participate in the investigation of a shooting death that happened, or two shooting deaths that happened at Rough Creek Lodge on February 2nd, 2013?
Yes, sir, I did.
How did you become involved in that investigation?
I received a phone call. I believe it was on a Saturday evening. I was at home. I received a phone call from my lieutenant and advised me that I needed to respond to that location and assist with the processing of the crime scene.
About when did you arrive at the Rough Creek Lodge?
I want to say around in between 10 and 11 that evening.
Okay. So the scene had been, it was dark when you arrived.
Yes, sir.
Did you visit and make inquiries of the law enforcement who had already secured the scene about how it was when they found it?
Yes, sir, I did.
And were you satisfied that the scene had been effectively secured from the time of the first response of law enforcement?
Yes, sir. When I first arrived, the front gate was secured and had an officer there that had started a crime scene log that was checking law enforcement into the scene. So that was the first primary perimeter of the crime scene. And as I got in there, the inner crime scene was buried off with crime scene tape and secured.
Okay. And which agency had taken possession of the crime scene?
I believe Erath County Sheriff's Office.
Were you satisfied that they effectively and competently handled the security of that crime scene?
Yes, sir, it was.
And so then you took it from there.
Yes, sir.
What did you find when you arrived at the crime scene?
I found two male individuals that had multiple gunshot wounds. I had numerous shell casings. There was a shooting covered deck that was approximately 12 by 62 feet. It was covered with metal tin. It had a gray composite material plank flooring and multiple firearms and ammunition that were on the back deck of that structure.
By the time you arrived, had all medical personnel and emergency personnel left the scene?
Yes, sir.
What steps did you first take once you arrived at the sports shooting range?
I met Ranger Don Stoner and Ranger Tony Bradford were already on the scene prior to my arrival. I met with them because they'd already assessed what the scene was. Ranger Stoner had already started the process of videotaping the scene and then documented with the digital photographs also.
Okay, so is that normal, proper procedure?
Yes, sir, it is.
Now, when you began to inspect the scene, did you find a large number of used shell casings that had been fired from firearms?
Yes, sir, I did.
What types of shell casings did you find?
I believe we found a large majority of 223 shell casings. We found 45 ACP shell casings, 9mm shell casings. I think that there was a 22 250 shell casing. I think there was 308 shell casings. I think there was 11 38 caliber shell casings. And we had, I believe, 6 45 long Colt shell casings that we found amongst. I think there was a 40 caliber also. There was numerous shell casings.
You had a variety of calibers and types of shell casings.
Yes, sir.
Now, the 223, just to specifically address the 223, is that shell casing for a round fired from one of these sporting rifles, like was found at the scene?
Yes, sir. It's a rifle round.
Now, did you know at that time whether any of those shell casings actually could be tied to any of those firearms?
No, sir. My understanding at the time that we arrived on the scene that somebody had mentioned that the brass on that shooting range after they shot, but that really didn't matter. We were going to collect all the items of evidence that we found anyway, so we collected them.
So your job or your task at the time that you arrive at a scene like this is not to try to identify what's important, but to collect it all.
Yes, sir.
And is that what you did?
Yes, sir.
And you marked it all.
Yes, sir.
Now, you at that time, you don't have any ability to use ballistics forensics testing to decide which of those came from the weapons that were at the scene.
No, sir.
Or which shell casings may have been there before.
No, sir.
Now, in this being a shooting sports range, your understanding was it had been used multiple times before.
Yes, sir.
Now, you were provided information about a policy that people clean up their brass.
Yes, sir.
You don't know whether anybody actually followed that policy at this sporting
No, sir.
range. Okay. And we'll get to that later. Certainly, we're not going to ask you to identify what came from what gun. Now, as you in the process of once you use this sophisticated mapping device, did you do a more old-fashioned way of marking and identifying the evidence that you found?
Yes, sir. We placed evidence markers, yellow, we call them tints. They've got numbers on them. They're yellow and black numbers. They have a little scale on them also, and we placed those by each piece of evidence to identify those and help us catalog them at a later date or later time.
Now, your ultimate goal is to actually collect all that evidence.
Yes, sir.
What is the purpose of putting these markers next to them in place on the scene?
To help us identify what piece of evidence was where in the scene and to record that for later date.
And do you make a photographic record of the marked evidence once you've completed putting these numbered markers by the items?
Yes, sir.
And did you mark everything?
Yes, sir.
Just like you eventually collected everything.
There were some items after we removed the body that we didn't have enough of those tints. We ran out of numbered tints that we had because we had so much evidence, but we still continued on and labeled those items evidence. We just didn't have a tint to put by.
Okay, but you still were able to keep track of where those items were.
Yes, sir.
And of course, we got photographs.
Yes, sir.
Did you and the other rangers take photographs of the scene after all these markers have been set out?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is you see these red markers that are at the scene. There's one to the left and one over on the deck and one to the right. Were those, what do those red spots depict?
I believe those are the locations of the different scans where the station was set up.
So those would reflect these other 3 scans that are on the left in the
Yes.
bar?
Yes, sir.
And if I double click on one of those, then it moves my vantage point to that spot. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And using the mouse on the computer, I can then rotate around and see a full panoramic view of the crime scene.
Yes, sir.
And if I wanted to look at, say, that marker where the mouse is right now, I could then use the scroll wheel of the mouse and zoom in and look at that and see that was a shell casing mark number 60. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You can do that with all the markers on the scene.
Yes, sir.
Looking at these sporting firearms on the deck that were above Chad Littlefield, could you describe for the jury did you as you collected this evidence, did you ascertain whether there were loaded weapons at this scene?
Yes, sir, we did.
And could you describe for the jury what weapons you determined were actually loaded?
The only weapons on the scene that were loaded were 2 1911 style handguns. One was on Mr. Kyle's body inside the waistband holster, and then Mr. Littlefield had a Kimber 1911 style handgun that was also in a waistband holster.
Okay. So there were only 2 guns, and they were on the persons of Chad and Chris.
Yes, sir.
Now, there were obviously a number of other weapons that were at the scene.
Yes, sir.
Did you get some close-up photos of the location of some particular handguns that we later learned were of importance?
Yes, sir, we did.
Now, I do want to Ranger, look at this platform of firearms, these sporting firearms that we have. Did you find any of those weapons loaded?
No, sir.
Looking at this tan sporting firearm, which of the markers is applicable to that? Is that 51?
Yes, sir, that is 51.
Okay, and that's a sporting type rifle. Where I'm pointing here, I'm sorry, this is kind of in the way, but there's a magazine well here on this gun, is there not?
Yes, sir.
And that's where you would insert a magazine of ammunition for it in order for it to fire.
Yes, sir.
Will it fire without ammunition?
If it has one in the chamber, it could. Yes, sir.
Did you find one in the chamber of any of these guns?
No, sir.
So this firearm didn't even have a magazine in it, right?
No, sir.
Now looking at further up where we have a black sporting firearm, it appears to have a magazine in it.
Which I can't see.
Oh,
I can't see which one he's pointing at. Listen.
I tell you what, I'll come over here. The one just up and to the right of the 10 we just looked at.
Yes, sir.
Marker number 50. It has a magazine.
Yes, sir.
Did you find any live rounds in the magazine or in the chamber that way?
No, sir.
Indeed, you found on any of these firearms on the deck, you found no live rounds in the weapons.
No, sir. Did not.
This black handgun, which we may learn more about later, the black handgun number 54, is that in the position it was in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I apologize, but in relation to Chad, it was right above him. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It was.
So this depiction that makes it look like it's right over him is accurate?
Yes, sir.
Now we see Christopher Kyle, and we're looking down now at a marker 15 next to a revolver that looks like what we just saw in those photographs.
Yes, sir.
Is that the same revolver?
Yes, sir. It is.
So this is where that firearm was found.
Yes, sir.
I need to go through some exhibits with you, Ranger. I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 209. Now, for safety, Ranger, what you're looking at, firearms, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You can inspect that and compare it to your record.
Yes, sir. It's the Springfield XD 45 ACP handgun.
Is it a uniquely identifiable piece?
Yes, sir.
A serial number?
Yes, sir. It does.
Is that the same item that you collected seen that day?
Yes, sir. It was.
Is that item depicted in the sphere on view here now?
Yes, sir. It is.
God, we offer State's Exhibit 209.
Let's see attorneys real quick.
Now I'll show you what's been marked as Exhibit 210. Okay, have you had the opportunity to inspect the State's Exhibit 210?
Yes, sir.
And did you collect that item?
Yes, sir. Did.
And is it depicted on State's Exhibit 115? I've drawn a circle where I'd like for you to look there. You can see on the screen now.
Yes, sir. It is.
So is that the 45 long Colt that posted up photographs of previously?
Yes, sir. It is.
Now, when just to describe, just for the benefit of the record, when you collect these firearms and you unload them and process them for safety, what do you do with them after that?
They're packaged up and sent to our DPS crime lab to be analyzed by our firearms experts.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibits 2. Okay, you recognize what's in State's Exhibit 211?
Yes, sir.
Did you collect that item?
Yes, sir. We did.
And was at the scene?
Yes, sir.
Of this crime? Is it depicted here in State 115?
Yes, sir. It is.
So that thing in circle number 52 is that gun.
Yes, sir.
Is and it's a uniquely identifiable item. It's the same condition as when you secured it.
Yes, sir.
United States would offer State's Exhibit 211.
You may.
Now, Ranger, this state exhibit 211. Can you describe what type of firearm it is?
It is a 38 caliber single action revolver. I believe it's a Uberta brand also.
Is its operation very similar to the one we just looked at, the 45?
Yes, sir.
And this one is on the deck.
Yes, sir.
When you picked up and secured that firearm, were there any shells or shell casings in it?
No, sir.
At the scene, did you find any? Now, obviously, you didn't do any forensics, but did you find any shell casings that would operate in that type of firearm?
Yes, sir. We found 11 38 caliber shell casings, spent shell casings.
You collected those.
Yes, sir.
I'll show you now what's been marked states to 12. You recognize it?
Yes, sir. It's a Springfield 1911 style 45 ACP semi-automatic handgun.
And with it, does it have a magazine?
Yes, sir, it does.
And did you collect that? Having compared that with your notes, did you collect that specific gun?
Yes, sir. We collected it off of Mr. Kyle.
Now, this firearm is what caliber?
45 ACP.
So it's the same caliber as the state exhibit 209, the Springfield black gun. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, is this state's exhibit 212 the same firearm depicted in the photograph on 108?
Yes, sir, it is.
Now, where was this firearm located?
In a holster, waistband holster on Mr. Kyle.
Did you find 45 ACP shell casings at the scene?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you have any ability on the scene of ascertaining whether those shell casings were fired from either of these guns?
It didn't appear that Mr. Kyle's gun had been removed from the holster. It was still fully loaded and in that condition, so it didn't appear that it had ever been removed or fired, but there's no way that I could positively tell you that.
Did you collect all those 45 ACP shell casings so they could be tested?
Yes, sir, I did.
I'll show you State's Exhibit 213.
This is a Kimber 1911 style 45 ACP semi-automatic handgun.
And where was it located?
It was located in the waistband holster of Mr. Littlefield.
And what type of ammunition does it fire?
45 ACP.
Just like the one that Chris had.
Yes, sir.
Is it a similar style gun?
Yes, sir, it is.
Different brand.
Yes, sir.
Did it appear that this firearm had been unholstered and fired?
No, sir, it didn't appear that it had been removed or fired.
Exhibit 235, can you describe what that is?
It is a receipt from Taco Bell that is located at 410 North I-35 Service Road in Red Oak, Texas. And it was, the purchase was on February the 2nd, 2013 at 6:50 and 38 seconds p.m. The purchase was for 2 bean burritos, which the cost was $2.18 at 18 cents tax, and the total was $2.36. And it was a drive-through purchase.
The time you got was here 6:50 p.m. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
On February the 2nd, 2013.
Yes, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
You said earlier that you didn't process the drug. That was processed at a lab somewhere.
Yes, sir.
But you assisted in an inventory of the truck.
Yes, sir.
Other than a Taco Bell receipt, did you gather other items out of the truck?
Yes, sir. We did.
Copious amounts of ammunition.
Yes, sir.
Give me a ballpark figure. What are we talking about as far as ammunition goes in the truck?
I don't know. I mean, we didn't individually count. I mean, the total of rounds that we recovered, but it was quite a bit.
Significant.
Yes, sir.
Boxes.
Yes, sir.
Loose rounds.
Yes, sir.
Sacks of rounds of ammunition.
Yes, sir.
In the hundreds.
Yes, sir.
When you were inventorying the truck, were there any weapons in the truck?
No, sir.
Was there any place, either in the cab of the truck or in the bed of the truck, that you might describe as a lockbox or a gun safe or some special way to carry guns outside of the cab of the truck?
Not to my knowledge. Not. I don't remember anything like that. Yes, sir. I believe we did.
And when you inventoried the truck, not only did you look at the cab, you looked at the bed.
Yes, sir.
There wasn't any kind of special apparatus place to put guns.
I can't remember one. No, sir.
Were there any gun cases?
Not that I don't believe so. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but I don't remember any gun cases.
Okay, so if the guns were transported to that range at Rough Creek Lodge in that vehicle, they could have either been loose in the cab or loose in the bed, but there wasn't any kind of special area custom made to carry guns or anything like that.
Not that I remember.
And the only two firearms at the scene that you processed that had any live rounds of ammunition are the two .45 caliber compact 1911 style semi-automatic handguns, with one was a Kimber and one was a Springfield. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That were loaded. Those are the only two that had any live rounds in them.
Yes, sir.
In regard to the Sphere-On image that we looked at and counsel pointed out, there's a whole bunch of other weapons out there on the bench that are not in evidence at this point. They haven't been given open a box and showed the jury, like those sporting rifles, for example, correct?
Correct.
And just so the jury's clear, one of those sporting rifles pointed to didn't have a magazine in it, and I think your testimony was, well, it was unloaded, but you wouldn't. It could be fired if it had one in the chamber.
Yes, sir.
The other sporting rifle that was closest to that, the black one that counsel pointed out, had a magazine in it. By looking at that, no one would know whether or not that gun was loaded or not unless they checked the action, correct?
Correct.
And you'd have to physically pick it up and pull the bolt back and look.
Yes, sir.
Or take the magazine out, look at it too, because you can pull the bolt back. You might not necessarily see if there was rounds in the magazine.
Well, if you pull the bolt back, you can visually look in there and see if there's anything.
You could if you hold it at the right angle, correct?
Yes, sir.
But I mean, it's possible to pull the bolt back and look down the chamber and not know whether or not there's rounds in the magazine.
Correct.
I'll pass the witness.
All right, you may step down.
You may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Sure, my name is Flavio Salazar.
And you can see plain as day when you turn around with your back to them. What do you work for?
I work for the City of Lancaster Police Department.
All right. So at Lancaster Police Department, were you working back on February the 2nd, 2013?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And what were you doing that day?
I was assigned to patrol, so basically still doing the same thing I'm doing now. Been doing that for like the last 9 years.
Okay. And did you have occasion to be called or dispatched to a house located at 220 West 6th Street in Lancaster?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the nature of the call?
We got alerted over the radio that the suspect, obviously, that we had been looking for, they had been looking for earlier from a murder, was at the house. They just pulled up.
So, your department had received information. Was that from some other agency?
I'm not sure exactly how they got the information. It kind of got relayed to us, and working in patrol just came to us.
Right. So you were aware that this was somebody suspected of murdering someone?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you aware that he was suspected of murdering more than one person?
I only remembering just one person that was mentioned.
And why was that memorable to you?
Well, I was in Iraq at around the same time that Mr. Kyle was there, so kind of know the name, kind of know what he did.
And so were there patrol cars and also unmarked cars that went to that scene at 220 West 6th Street?
I believe so, yes, ma'am. Mhm.
Or were you in a marked car?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And is this car that you're in, is it equipped with some sort of dash camera
Yes, ma'am.
that's able to record, if you're driving around town and record where you're going?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything in front of the car?
Yes.
Now, was you also wearing any kind of body camera?
I wasn't, no, ma'am.
So the dash camera in your vehicle is the only camera that you have.
Yes, ma'am.
And was your camera, was it operating properly that day?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Now, at the scene there, are there other officers that are actually having contact with somebody that you later learned name was Eddie Ray Brown?
Yes, ma'am.
At the scene on 6th Street, are you having contact with Eddie Ray Brown?
Oh, no, ma'am.
Okay. So the other officers are doing that.
Yes, ma'am.
And so what is your task there on 6th Street? What are you trying to do?
Just set up the perimeter. I was one of the only squads there that actually pulled up real close to the scene where I had a camera, so I flipped my camera on and just kind of held the perimeter to the rear. I'm equipped with an AR, so I had my AR out.
You gotta tell us what.
I'm sorry, an AR is a gun like a long rifle. So I kind of pulled my long rifle out, just kind of setting the perimeter just to see what we needed to do.
Was it important for y'all in the police department to sort of secure this area of the street?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Were y'all trying to keep other people or vehicles from coming into this area?
Yes, ma'am.
And why was that?
We got guns out, and we don't want anybody else to get hurt or shot.
Is there, can you kind of describe what is the, I guess, level of concern there about this whole matter?
Well, we know someone had gotten killed already. So, we got a guy sitting in the truck that we know killed somebody. And so we're trying to make sure that we can kind of keep him there.
And without going into what anybody said or anything, was there a period of time in which there were other officers trying to convince Mr. Ralph to come out of his truck?
To my understanding, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so was there a bit of a standoff, I don't know if it's the word I'm looking for, but where nothing happened and he did not come out of the truck?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did that go on for?
About 20, 25 minutes, I think. Maybe 30, something like that.
And do you know who it was that was talking to Mr. Ralph trying to get him to come out of the truck?
It was Chief Smith and Detective Shavera.
And so, were they up pretty close to the truck?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am. They were like the way the vehicles were kind of parked out there. I think you can kind of see it in my video where their vehicles were parked in relation to the truck, and then my vehicle, when I finally adjusted my camera again to where you could kind of see everything, they were pretty close.
What do you remember about this truck?
It was a big old truck, and then I zoomed in on my camera. I zoomed in to the back, and I guess it was a Ford because it had that little weird symbol, like a round oval symbol, and then it had, I believe it's the skull. Kind of knew about.
And so, were you familiar with that already?
A little bit, yes, ma'am. We had already gotten a description of the vehicle that had been taken. So.
Okay, so y'all knew when you got out there that there was a particular type of vehicle, a truck.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said it's a big old truck.
Oh, yes, ma'am. It's a big old truck.
And the vehicles that y'all have that are issued by the Lancaster Police Department, what kind of vehicles are you driving?
I drive a Crown Vic. It's a take-home, so I drive a Ford Crown Victoria.
I said that you can't drive more than one vehicle.
Yes, ma'am.
You're driving a Crown Vic, and is that what the other patrol cars are?
Some officers drive a Tahoe, the Chevy Tahoe, the lowered edition Chevy Tahoe, the police model.
Right. But the other marked units are those general Crown Vics.
Yes, ma'am.
So they're a little lower and smaller than that truck.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Now, were you doing anything while you're there at the scene to attempt to disable that truck?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do?
Myself and Detective Howard, we got some stop sticks and we crawled underneath the big truck and attempted to. Well, we put the stop sticks on the back tires.
Explain to the jury, what's a stop stick?
Stop stick is like a triangle shaped item with a cover on it, and it's got some spikes in there. And the spikes basically, once they pierce the tire, let the air out slowly of the tire.
And are these things that you have employed in your duties as a police officer to try and stop either a moving vehicle or one that is stopped?
Yes, ma'am.
And generally, do they work and they pierce a tire?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So were you able to get under the truck and put out some stop sticks?
Yes, ma'am. Myself and Detective Howard took our duty belts off because we obviously have stuff in front. We don't want it to get damaged, and we low crawled to the truck and got underneath the truck, and then we put the stop sticks in place, one on each of the tires.
So what I'm picturing you saying, are you sort of slithering on your belly? On the truck,
Yes, ma'am.
trying to do this and not get noticed that you're doing this.
Yes, ma'am.
So after you got those stop sticks in place, what happened?
We retrograded back to our vehicles, put our duty gear back on, and then we just kind of waited.
And then at some point in time, did Eddie Ralph drive the truck away from that location?
Yes, ma'am.
And we're talking about Eddie Ralph. Do you see him here in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am. The gentleman sitting with the glasses on.
Show me the record reflect that the witness is identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect.
Now, so once he drove off in the truck, then what happened?
Since I had the mark squad and my camera rolling, I jumped in my car and the chase was on.
Did he just pull away gently, or kind of describe how he left the scene?
Initially, when he stepped on the gas, obviously the black smoke came out of the vehicle. I guess it's a diesel. I don't know if that's what diesel engines do, but notice the black smoke. The stop sticks on the passenger side rear had caught in the driver thing, so you kind of see him dangling. So I didn't want to become a victim of a stop stick incident. So I kind of held back a little bit and just drove. And then eventually he made it onto Pleasant Run, where another officer attempted to disable the truck. And then he took off right after that. And then another person took over the chase. And then eventually the truck stopped on 35.
And did you actually then follow this truck as it fled from the scene at 220 West 6th Street?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And you're in your marked vehicle.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've got your cameras rolling.
Yes, ma'am.
And did it actually capture your part of the chase?
Yes, ma'am.
It captured the whole chase. At some point, are you in the lead in this chase?
I am initially, and then Sergeant Logan goes in front of me and takes over.
Now, is there a point in this chase where another officer rams this truck?
Yes, ma'am.
And what officer is that?
That's Officer Grimes.
And what was he driving when he rammed this truck?
He was also driving a Crown Vic Mark squad.
Okay. And then after Officer Grimes rammed the truck, did that disable the truck and stop it right there?
Oh, no, ma'am.
What happened?
Well, there's a big plume of smoke, and then the truck just took off. And driving a Crown Vic, it gets up and goes, but doesn't get up and go to catch that truck. So Sergeant Logan took the lead, and we just kept going down Pleasant Run at pretty high speeds.
After Sergeant, is it Officer Grimes? What's his level?
He's an officer just like I am.
After he rammed the truck, did the speed of the truck that Eddie Ray Ralph was driving, did that change?
Oh, yes, ma'am. It increased.
In what way?
It was just going. It was flying down the road.
And then you have to increase your speed to keep up.
Yes, ma'am.
And was he traveling at the same speed as the other traffic, or was he going faster than the rest of the traffic?
He was way ahead of me, so obviously he's probably going a lot faster. In my video, you can see cars kind of pulling to a side. He's going.
Now, eventually, did the truck become disabled and stop because it wasn't operating?
Yes, ma'am.
And about where was that?
It was at I-35, just north of I-20.
And did you said at one point after he was rammed by Officer Grimes, Sergeant Logan took the lead in front
Yes.
of you,
Mhm.
but then were you pretty much second in the chase?
Well, after the ramming, I'd stayed second, was calling out, where they were going. So this way Sergeant Logan could pay attention to what he's doing. So I'm calling the chase at that point. There's a point where I'm thinking he's going to exit 20. So I'm kind of waiting to see. And then he passes I-20, the exit ramp for I-20. So then we come back And I'm in between a unmarked and a marked squad, which is Sergeant Logan's vehicle.
And when the chase came to an end finally up there on I-35, were you able to capture what happened there at the end of the chase on your video?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And you were able to see what happened?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this the truck we were looking at right here, the black truck?
Yes, ma'am.
We have the sound up. Hold on a second. Pass it.
Pass the witness.
I have no further questions for Officer Salazar.
All right, you may step down.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Would you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
I'm Michael Smith. I'm with the Lancaster Police Department.
Were you called to a location at 220 West 6th Street there in Lancaster?
Yes, ma'am, by Detective Shavera.
Okay. And now Detective Shavera, is he with y'all's department anymore?
No, ma'am, he's retired.
Now, well, you understand we're here on the trial of Eddie Ray Routh, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, did Detective Shavera actually live near Eddie Ray Routh?
Right next door.
And so he was acquainted with him.
Yes, ma'am.
And so what was it that prompted your department to respond to this location at 220 West 6th Street?
Detective Shavera had called me. Detective Shavera and I had worked there since we were both patrolmen. I was over him in CID for quite a while, 3 or 4 years. Anyway, he had called me and said, "Hey, I got a call from Eddie Routh's sister." And she said that he had come by our house and said he.
She's standing.
You can't repeat what somebody else said,
Right.
but I guess, was it your understanding though that there had been a conversation
Yes, ma'am.
and he had received some information?
Lieutenant Worley called me back on the phone and he said that there had been a couple homicides in Erath County and he thought it might be linked. So,
And is that based on the information that Officer Detective Shavera had gotten?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so all that information, putting two and two together, I guess, did that cause y'all to go to this house at 220 West 6th Street?
That caused me to go to the house
Okay.
at first.
And when you go to the house, basically, what is the nature of the call there?
As it was all unfolding, I didn't find out about the Erath County deal until I was already en route to town. Detective Sperry called me because he's concerned about his house, concerned about his family, and he was out doing something. So I told him I'll run by there and just check on the house, check on things as all this is unfolding, and we gather more information.
So did you have information as you're en route to that house that 2 men had been killed over in Erath County?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have information about a vehicle that might be involved in that capital murder?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have information about who might be driving that vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that?
Eddie Routh.
And so putting all that together, did y'all, I guess, through Detective Shavera, because he lives next door, you know where Eddie Ray Routh lives?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you went to this location at 220 West 6th. Who else went there?
I arrived first looking for the vehicle that Eddie Routh was supposed to be driving. It wasn't there. I talked to Shavera on the phone, let him know that. He said that he had talked to Routh's mother or sister, somebody in the family, and said that if his dog was there, he has not been home. If his dog was gone, he'd been home. So Shavera arrived on scene, and we went to look and see if Routh's dog was in his pen. We walked around back to where the dog pen was. Dog pen was empty, so we came back to the front of the house. We were more parked in front of Detective Shavera's house than we were the Routh house.
And you said, did you have a description of this vehicle that you were looking for that might be associated with these murders?
The information we'd got was it was a crew cab Ford with a lift kit on it, dark in color, possibly black.
Large truck?
Yes, ma'am.
And based on, I guess, y'all's collective knowledge of what Eddie Routh drove, was that a vehicle that would normally be associated with that house or Eddie Routh?
I've never seen a truck like that on the street. No, ma'am.
And so y'all went around back, checked, the dog was gone. Then what happened?
We were standing up front by our cars, talking and kind of talking over the information that we'd received and he had received from the sister. And the neighbor across the street walked outside to see what we were doing.
I'm going to say what she said, but did you get more information from the neighbor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then after you talked to the neighbor, or did talking to the neighbor cause you to do anything differently?
We were still gathering information. We had thought that he had been and gone, and he was probably already left and was out of the city at that time.
Okay. And so then what happened?
While we were sitting there talking, I heard a truck turn on 6th Street behind us off of State Highway 342. So we turned to look at the truck. We could tell it had a lift kit on it. It's a pretty large truck. And we were watching it as it came down the street and approached us and passed us. And then it stopped in front of Routh's residence.
Okay. Are y'all the only vehicle at the scene at that point in time?
Yes, ma'am.
And so this big dark truck comes up the street, and then what?
It passes our vehicles. We're parked in front of Detective Shavera's house, right here. Eddie Routh's house is right here. The truck passes us and then pulls in front of our 2 vehicles.
Okay.
And as it parked, the door came open, and Detective Shavera was looking inside, and he said, "That's Eddie," and he started calling out to Eddie at that time. Eddie never got out of the truck at that point. He was just sitting there with the door open.
Did other officers begin to arrive there at that scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And did some patrol officers come that were in marked vehicles?
Yes, ma'am.
And some officers that have dash cameras come to the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any sense of how many officers initially came to the scene?
I couldn't give you an accurate count, but probably 4, 5, 6 right in there.
Okay. 6 officers or 6 cars?
Probably both. We ride one-man units.
Okay. Except you and Shavera in one car that day.
Shavera and I were in 2 different cars.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. So were y'all both in unmarked cars?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Since he's a detective, and then you were also, I guess, higher up? Yeah.
Yes, I had a take-home car. So,
okay. So you're not in a marked car, and neither is he.
No, ma'am.
Are they both Crown Victorias?
Yes, ma'am.
So the other officers that have marked cars come to the scene, and then what happens?
Well, prior to the other officers arriving at the scene, Eddie shut the door on the truck. Detective Shavera was yelling at him, trying to get him to step outside, trying to get him to talk to him. He wouldn't talk to him. He was parked in front of us at an angle. He closed the door on the truck and then backed up right next to Shavera's car, where we had to move around on driver's side of Shavera's car and talked to Eddie over the hood. He backed up, cracked the window, and killed the truck at that point.
You mean to shut off the ignition?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, did somebody come up on the scene at some point in time who was actually another officer that was wearing a body camera with a body mic?
Yes, ma'am. It was Sergeant Logan.
You and Detective Shavera are standing. If the truck is facing, okay, say if you're the driver of the vehicle, where are you and Detective Shavera in relation to the driver of the vehicle?
We are on the driver's side of Detective Shavera's vehicle, looking over the hood, and Eddie had backed up right next to him on the passenger side, facing both vehicles facing the same direction.
Okay, so are you able to see Eddie Routh in the driver's seat from where you are?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he have the window up or down at that point?
He had it down a little ways,
Okay,
where you could see the top of his head.
okay, but not all the way down.
No, ma'am.
Had he had it down further before?
The window was never all the way down at any point in time.
Just had it down a little bit so y'all could communicate through the crack in the window.
Yes, ma'am.
And were you and Detective Shavera close enough where you could engage in a conversation with Eddie Routh?
Yes, ma'am.
And so let me make it clear too, Sergeant Logan is not the one talking to Eddie Routh.
Correct. It's Detective Shavera and myself.
Okay, but is he right there next to y'all?
Yes, ma'am. He came up right behind me. He says a few words to Eddie during our conversation, but he's not over the conversation with him.
Okay, and it's you and Detective Shavera engaged in this conversation. Before Sergeant Logan arrived there with his body camera on, did you hear Eddie Routh make any statements to you and Detective Shavera?
Yes, ma'am. Before all the officers arrived, when we first started the conversation back and forth, Detective Shavera was asking him what he was doing, how was he doing, just general conversation, trying to open up a dialogue with him. And at that point, he had told us he had taken a couple souls and he had some more souls to take. As Detective Shavera is talking to him, I'm trying to come up with a game plan. I don't want a gun battle in the middle of the residential neighborhood. I don't want to leave the scene. All I want to do is just get Detective Shavera to, talk him out. Let's get out and end this peacefully.
Were you concerned that he did have weapons in the truck, or did you have information that he did?
I was concerned that he did and had information that there was guns missing.
Okay. And so, was Detective Shavera successful right off the bat at getting Eddie Routh to come out of the truck?
No, ma'am.
And so, did he engage in a conversation that I guess went on for some period of time, trying to get him to come out of the truck?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that captured on Sergeant Logan's body camera as he's standing behind the two of you and Detective Shavera?
Most of it after he arrived.
Okay. Oh, one other thing I want to talk to you about. Is there a point on there that a phone goes off in the truck and Eddie Routh answers it?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, did that cause some alarm initially when that
Yes,
phone
ma'am.
went off?
Not alarmed. Just never came to my mind that he even had a phone. Everybody has a phone. It was just surprising that in the middle of our deal, phone rings. He picks it up, starts talking on the phone.
Are we heading down? Are we heading down?
Just to make it clear, Lieutenant Smith, this is Sergeant Logan running up onto the scene, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so that's his voice that we heard, and he's running to get there. So we're about to see y'all. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, you need to go over to it. Down the street. Backing up. Take some cover. Backing up. Well, back it up. Hey, you got fucking going. I'm not on. Get the fucking light on. Get that fucking light, brother. Eddie! Eddie! Turn it off, Eddie! Eddie! Turn it off, please! Eddie! It's Sergeant Logan! Come on with your hands open, buddy. It's not worth it. I'm gonna shoot out the tires. Eddie! 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 Come on, guys. Eddie! Eddie, come on, Eddie! Stop! Hey, roll the window down. Roll the window down. Talk to us, man. We're gonna help you. Just roll the window down. Come on. Eddie, we got you prepared. Come on, man. Everything's cool. Just roll the window down. Do what? Okay, keep your head right there, man. Hey, let's keep your head off. Jesse, talk to you. Jesse, come here. Jesse, gonna talk to you. Eddie. All right, look, guys. I know this is really bad right now, but we're all scared to do. Okay? Look at your friends. You can hear me clearly. Just shut the truck off for a minute. The way you talk, okay? Turn it off for a minute. Turn it off for a second. Turn it off and off again, okay? All right. Yeah. We're trying to figure it out right now, okay? We're trying to figure it out right now. So right now, the best thing for everybody is you step on the front with your hands open so we can see. Everybody can relax, okay? Now, once you open the door, very slowly, come out with your hands straight up and come talk to me, okay? Eddie, I don't want to hurt you, Eddie. Okay, we all grew up together here. Listen to me, buddy. Okay, this is going to be bad for everybody if you don't do as I ask you. Trust me, because I know your parents are going to be really hurt if we don't get this thing resolved peacefully, okay? Where are they even at? Zach, I don't know, they're on the phone with somewhere here in Texas. They want to come home. Got those, let me try to talk to Eddie, find what's going on first, and that's what we're doing. Okay, listen to me. Listen to me. I'm not going to lie to you. I'll get your parents down here. So when you get down here, just do what I asked you to do. Come on, as a neighbor, as a friend. It's going to take them 2-3 hours to get here, Eddie. Well, we're going to have to do them first. Eddie, here, tell me this, okay? Tell me this, walk me. I will try to get them down here. You can stay in that truck. Just throw me the keys out so you won't run off and get upstairs, okay? I'm gonna move it up in the. No, don't worry about it. We got a clock, man. We're fine. Just throw me the keys out here as a gesture that you're not gonna run off while I try to get them down here, making sure I get down here, okay?
So we're on the fucking car. Get ready to block you. You hear me?
No,
Get somebody get around that fucking block and we go stay off.
Let me ask you this.
Somebody get a car around here and block it. No, don't block it yet, just get ready to block.
Okay?
Get ready to
Talk
block.
that out together. Okay. You have no reason not to trust me here. What are you talking about? You're possibly right in certain areas, but we got it right now. What is it that you want? You want to resolve these. You want to see your parents, right? Okay, we can get there. Okay, just come with me. Come with me and let's talk. We'll get them down here. You can visit with them safely. Okay. I slept some when I got in from work.
Yeah, no, it is.
Okay, well, we can get you a place where you can get some rest. When you're finished, you're going to be rested. Well, I can guarantee you that. I guarantee you. Because wherever, you come out, whenever you come out of there, yes, because they, have to do their job, Jay. Just like you have to do your job. Remember? What's my job right now? No, that's for the laws to take care of. Well, I understand what you're saying. You're right, okay? Okay, hold on. Eddie, open the window, leave it to a point where we can talk, Eddie. Okay, listen to me, okay? We are here because we have to be, and we're not going away. But as a friend, as a neighbor, we have always been able to talk, and I've always assured you that if you ever need anything, come talk to me, right?
That's true. That's something that
Okay, can you tell me why?
Hey.
Uh-huh. Well, the people. Right? But well, that's what we need to try to figure out. Okay? We need to figure out what's going on here, what's going on, and what you're thinking, and let's see if it's right or wrong. But the people that I deal with, whether it's all we know it's safe. It's not what you're seeing out here in this world. You have to leave, and you left, and you served your country, and when you're gone, all this happened, and it wasn't in your control. Okay. Yes, you're right, and I understand that. But the thing is, right now, for you to be in control of this situation, and nothing else goes bad, and you don't get hurt, your mom don't get hurt, your dad don't get hurt, we need to resolve this and come talk in person without all these officers here and everything. Okay, but we can't let you move right now, Eddie. Okay. Okay. Eddie, why can't we just go talk about this somewhere else? I'm sorry? Well, there's more than one way to do it, because we need to do it on neutral territory. We need to talk about it, me and you. If you want to talk about it, I'll walk with you over here. But, I need to see that, we can talk about this peaceably without any to be nervous. And that would be you coming out with your hands so we can talk about this thing. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but. Well, what I'm trying to tell you is that I'll walk over here to your house, to your front yard, and my hands will be open and your hands will be open, and we can talk about this. And we can call your mom and dad on my phone, and you can tell them that you need to see them. Well, the first step's going to be for us to get your mom and dad on the phone, let them know you're all right, and then for them to start back home. Because they want to come home to see you. I can call them, but I need you to come out here and talk to them with me. Talk to them. And if they tell you they're gonna come home, it's gonna take them a couple hours, 3 hours, will you come with me and then, they can come see you?
Yes, sir. If he rolls the window down all the way, if you just hand the phone to him, and they would snap it. Yeah, taste.
Hey, say that again, I couldn't hear you.
I don't know. I'm sure my bill.
Yes, and I guarantee you that.
If he rolls the window down, I'll hold the line on if he knows their
Okay, yes, you're right.
taste his.
If I get your parents your phone and here's when they come back and be there 2 or 3 hours, will you come with me and wait? I'll wait with you until they get there.
Yeah, see,
But will you do that for me, Eddie? Okay, what can we do? What is it that I can do for you that will help us get to that point where you can come peaceably and we can talk about this? Okay, then maybe we can both talk about that and figure it out both of us, because I've worked in this job and it's just, that's what I do, okay? Okay, we didn't either, but. Okay. Eddie, remember when we talked about the last time we talked? Things you cannot control, we don't worry about right now. Let's worry about what you can control. And that is you contacting your parents through me. Sir? Well, yeah, but right now, everybody's a little nervous because we don't, sorry? Everybody's a little nervous because we don't know, what's going on. Okay? Eddie, don't do that, Eddie. Because you're saying one thing, like you say, you can't trust the world, and right now we're trying to trust you. Well, you have to have some faith. And if you, like I said, last time we talked, okay, well, let me help you get some, let me get somebody to help us understand this. No, it's not a good, it was just society sometimes isn't in our favor. In our favor, all of us. Sometimes at some point in our lives, things change and we don't like it. And it's good for some people and bad for some people, but we have to go through those hard times to the good times, and it always gets better. How many times have we had situations where we're involved in, and I've been there with you and your dad and mom, and we got through those times, and mom just, okay.
Well, I don't care what he does to get them. Just see if he'll go over to the house and talk to you.
Okay, I am going to call them, but I'm not going to call them if I don't have you word on some things, Eddie, because I don't want to mislead them. I don't want them rushing down here. And see, that's the whole problem. I'm afraid if I call them and they rush the time limit, that something's going to happen. As long as they know you're safe and secure, they're going to come.
What's the time limit?
I don't know what traffic's like. I don't know if there's going to be a major accident on the highway. In certain parts, yes. No, you're right, and that's what I'm saying. Let me help you not worry about that part of it. You can't control it.
Hey.
Well, right now here in the U.S. is the best. Around the world in other nations, it is not the best. Because it's just the way life is, eh?
Are you serious?
Okay? I'm going to call your parents, okay? But if they're going to agree to calm down, are you listening to me? I don't know what's going on. Give me a second, okay? Okay? I'm going to put here. Okay, here, hear me out, okay? We need to see your hands, okay? We need to see that you are at peace and we can relax. What could help us, we can turn the light off if you'll do this. If you drop that window where you put your hands on the steering wheel, and then we can drop the lights and we can kind of not put it in your eyes, okay? How do we win, Eddie? No, Eddie, no. I'm not gonna walk up there and yank you out of the truck and not anybody else either, okay? Eddie, don't do that. Let me call your parents. Okay. I'm gonna call, okay? No, yeah, I can't do that. You're gonna have to meet me halfway with this. I'm doing your part to help you out. The phone is dialing, okay? Hey, Jody. Jody.
No.
Eddie, open the window. Got your mom on the phone. Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna put her on speakerphone so you can hear her voice, okay? Hold on. Eddie?
Roll the window down where you see your hand.
We're not gonna do nothing, Eddie. Go ahead and roll so you can hear it coughing and we'll be fine. Okay, Jody, go ahead and talk to him, Jody.
Okay. Is that finger not good enough? Ask me roll the window down. I got two.
Eddie, I want to tell her what we talked about, okay? Hey, Jody? Okay. Eddie doesn't know what's going on. We don't know exactly what's going on either, but here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get Eddie to come out of the truck and come with us, but here's the deal. Eddie said he will come out of the truck. If you guarantee you'll come down to the and will you do? It's gonna take a few hours. He wants to know where y'all are at. Can you tell me this town where you're at? They're in Abilene. So it's gonna take a few hours, but the traffic is good. No, you're not gonna go halfway. You're gonna meet us here. Here. It's not the situation. We can't do it halfway, buddy. Because we have the situation here, okay? And the mom. Eddie, mom talking to him. Well, I'm trying to talk to him and to come in with me, be safe, security together, so you don't have to rush and be worried about him something happening. Because you can't tell what's going on here over the phone. Eddie, have I ever given you a reason not to trust me in anything? When? Well, like I asked, we talked about it today. We said just call me or come talk to me. You got things we never finished our last conversation, remember? Because everybody kept on coming around. You know, so that's what we need to do before the time that your mom leaves and get here. We can finish that conversation and you can talk to them. That's, this is, you want to see this is probably the best solution. You should have no reason not to trust you. You go with me. We'll wait for dinner. Let's get here. They don't have to rush. We're going to go down here somewhere. We don't have to talk in the street. We can go down and sit on some table and we're just going to put in problems. If you want to, we can go to our station. Nothing can happen to you there. No, dude, I can't.
If you buy it,
You can come with me. No, it's not, Eddie. And we don't want it to be. No. If it was, I would not be here sitting and talking to you, buddy. Eddie, how long have we known each other?
to what?
Okay? Whatever the situation, I'm not going to guide you wrong. Okay? I'm not going to do that, Eddie. Only thing we can do at this point is go forward and go up with the situation up in a way that's gonna be best for you, for your parents, me, everybody.
It's dog.
Eddie,
Yeah.
no, Eddie, if they really want to barbecue your ass, that would have already happened. That's why we're here talking, Eddie. Eddie, look at it this way, Eddie. If you do it, what I'm asking you to do, if the error is a second time, then you're in control because you know that if I didn't help you, it didn't work itself out, then next time you know that you can't trust me. But I have to give you reason not to trust me. So this time, I'm asking you to trust me. Let's work with this. And if something ever happens and you feel this way again, then, that's your call, buddy. Do y'all have any guns? Do we have guns? Well, we have to. It's our job. I didn't do it. Okay, well, that's a good possibility you do, but we don't want to show our guns. You don't want to show yours. No, we don't. There you go. So we agree on the same thing. Well, if that's not a problem, I'm going to take this truck and move forward. Eddie, don't do that, Eddie. Eddie, don't bring that truck up because I know you probably want to go to your house, but I'm worried that before you get to your house, you'll make a decision and keep going. And we don't want to do that, Eddie. Eddie. What's that? You got a phone?
Tell me to walk to the house with you.
He's on the phone. He's on the phone.
Who's talking?
Where do you think this fucking door is large?
Right.
Yeah. He locked it. He reached up and locked it. He's talking to folk down in the range of Riley. I just spoke to him.
Eddie. Dad's on the phone. Okay. Can you just listen to him a second and see what he wants to say to you? Yeah. Ready? Can you hear him? Yes, sir. Eddie, I'll move the truck later. Come with me, walk with me to your yard, let's talk about this, Eddie. I can't walk back into the yard with you. Okay, then we can walk up the front here, in front of these lights together, we'll talk about this out in the open. But, it's nervous for everybody if we can't see what you're doing in the truck, you can't see what we're doing out here, and that way both of us, we can see what's going on in the surroundings, we can relax that part and focus on what we want to talk about. I can feel everybody beating on my soul over this, that's not good. No, it is not good. And because we're in this situation, and that evil part has control of it because we're making a decision to stay in that truck. No. I'm making a decision to also on this side of the line. Okay, so if you're making a decision, then you can control that situation and you can control that evil thought. And by you overpowering it, by you coming out here with me, by you be control of this, you're going to defeat that evil thought, the evil sentence that you're getting. Because you're in control, Eddie. You see what I'm saying? And once we diffuse the situation by you coming out with me, and then that feeling you're having is going to go away because you've overpowered it. Eddie, the sooner that we go together, the sooner your parents can start this way. Okay?
You already headed this way.
Eddie, hear me out. Eddie, I want to tell them to get off the phone and pack their stuff so they can start this way. And if we need to, we'll call them back, okay? Okay, Ray, you hear that? Eddie, don't, just stay right there. I'll stay right here. You stay right there. We can see each other, okay? I'll call you back. Eddie, there's no trouble. Eddie, Eddie, don't. can't hear anything. The truck's too loud. Okay, why don't we go take a nap somewhere you can be more comfortable? Eddie. Eddie. I'm sorry? Eddie, do me a favor, okay? I'm gonna back off and let's give it a couple of seconds. Do me a favor, just put your hands on the steering wheel. I'm gonna back off and we're gonna talk in a minute, okay? Okay, you need to get some of these.
You think you're talking in the, no, you're not gonna get in the fucking truck with him and say, hey, you want me to get in the truck with you, but you gotta roll the fucking window down so I can look around and make sure that you're on trails. And,
Eddie,
and
okay, I'm sure you're hearing what we're saying, right? Okay, that's why we're talking here, so you don't feel like we're trying to talk behind your back. Now, okay, well, here's the situation. We're trying to work something out where we both come to an agreement, okay? But you're gonna have to give us a few times, because I can't just all of a sudden say yes to what you would like, and you can't say yes to what we would like, right? So, do me a favor, just stay like that for a couple of seconds, and let's see if I can come up with something that we come some terms we can both agree on, okay? Give me just a minute.
I get one more packet.
Sorry, what, Eddie? Well, we're trying to figure out how we can do this as far as, a while ago you said something about me driving you to the station, right? To the station?
No.
Not really. Yeah, I think that everybody's got kind of cool, so everybody decided to go indoors for the night. But have you thought of anything that would maybe work this thing out to where we could kind of me and you go together and then wait for your mom and dad? Mom and dad, excuse me, I got some gas here. Have you thought of anything?
So somebody blocked that car off. This time.
Can you just make sure you don't do me a favor, Eddie? I'm not trying to shoot you like a kid. We want to relax. We want to misinterpret something. You can handle it the way you've been doing, and just so we can see and we all relax a little bit, okay? Well, no, because then we can't hear you if you try to call me because it's so loud. The diesel's so loud. Eddie, 5 minutes, Eddie. Okay?
Oh, Brian.
Now, Lieutenant Smith, ends with is Eddie Ralph pulling out away from this house
Yes, ma'am.
in this truck? Actually, I think we can probably skip ahead a little bit because this is in his car. Or maybe not. We'll see. Now, while he's there, let me at the end of the chase here. Does that end because the truck is disabled?
Yes, ma'am.
And did y'all determine that later on that truck was it had just pooped out?
Yes, ma'am. You could see all the fluid on Sergeant Logan's windshield that was coming from the truck.
Okay, so that's what that is. It's not raining all of a sudden.
No, ma'am.
I'll pass the witness.
Counsel asked you about several statements about whether or not you heard him being Mr. Ralph made during that videotape. Did you hear Eddie Ralph make the statement on that videotape that it's so effing crazy out here, we can't keep ourselves careful if we're not effing trusting our own stuff? Did you hear him make
Yes,
that
sir.
statement?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear him make the statement that I don't know if I'm going insane?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear him make the statement, is this about like hell walking on earth right now?
Yes, sir.
And did he respond to Shavera's statement? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but hell's walking on earth with us right now as we speak.
Yes, sir.
You remember that?
Yes, sir.
He did make that statement on the video.
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Ralph make the statement, I don't know. I don't know what peace and law and order is all about. And after Detective Shavera says, okay, then maybe we can both talk about that and figure it out, both of us, because I work for this job and it's that's what I do, okay? And Mr. Ralph said, it's a fine time, too. I didn't know if this was going to. I didn't, and then it's unintelligible. And then Shavera says, okay, we didn't either, but, and then there's something else unintelligible, and then Mr. Ralph says, it's diseases right now. You recall that part of the conversation?
No, sir. I don't recall the diseases portion.
Do you recall him asking Detective Shavera if it's voodoo that's upon us?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall him making the statement later in that conversation that I've been watching it on the news for weeks or, 2-3 days now, Jesse. The effing anarchy has been killing the world.
Yes, sir.
Did at one point Mr. Ralph ask Mr. Shavera, is the apocalypse on top of us right now?
Yes, sir. He asked about the apocalypse.
Toward the end of the conversation, did Mr. Ralph make the statement that I can feel everybody feeding on my soul a while ago, Jesse? That was not good.
Yes, sir.
And finally, at some point toward near the end, when Jesse or Detective Shavera and Mr. Ralph are talking, when Eddie says to a rather lengthy statement made by Detective Shavera about Eddie being in control, you see what I'm saying? Once we diffuse the situation, you coming out with me, and that feeling that you're having will go away because you've overpowered it. And Eddie Ralph says, it won't though. All it's going to do is diffuse in my brain. Y'all are going to try to, and then unintelligible. You remember that part?
Yes, sir.
And you testified initially that Eddie had said that he had just taken some souls and had some more to take.
Yes, sir. That was prior to, I was trying to remember as I was looking at the video, that was prior to everybody showing up. That was when he had pulled forward. I think it's when that conversation took place.
Well, isn't really what he said was that he had taken 2 souls that he had to take before they took his?
I don't recall, but it was something along those lines.
Pass the witness.
I'll pass the witness.
Did you smell any alcohol?
No, sir.
Smell any marijuana?
No, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
Aren't you,
Would you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Jeffrey Barnard, Barnard.
And how are you employed?
I'm the chief medical examiner and the director of the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences.
What was the cause of Christopher Kyle's death?
He died as a result of injuries from multiple gunshot wounds.
And how was that death classified?
Homicide.
And how many times, according to your autopsy, was Christopher Kyle shot?
6.
And so when Chris Kyle was brought into your office for his autopsy, was he fully clothed?
Yes.
And he had not been to the hospital, correct?
No,
So there was not that hospital intervention that you were talking about.
that's correct.
How tall was Chris Kyle and what did he weigh?
Yeah, the measurement that we took, it was 6'1", 216 pounds.
And what did you notice first about his physical condition in the external examination?
Well, he's a muscular man, but had 6 gunshot wounds.
Did he have any kind of identifying marks or scars?
He had some tattoos.
Was there evidence from the external examination, or the internal examination, that there had been any kind of a physical fight, like a fist fight or anything like that?
Yeah, there weren't any blunt force injuries beyond the superficial scrapes that I just described.
Okay. No significant bruising or anything like that?
Nope.
Anything to indicate that. Now, before we get into talking about these specific gunshot wounds, just overall, was Chris Kyle fairly healthy individual?
Yes.
And did he have any other kind of disease or medical condition?
Now, the most he had was about 30% obstruction of one of his coronary arteries, which that's not significant, not symptomatic.
And then you had mentioned earlier that you get blood samples and also take some other fluid samples from the person on whom you're doing the autopsy.
For toxicology, yes, or for blood card.
And you did this on Chris Kyle?
Yes.
And was he positive for any kind of alcohol or drugs?
There was one medication, but there were no drugs, no illegal drugs, no alcohol.
Okay. And what was that medication?
Venlafaxine.
You know what that is?
It's an antidepressant.
Okay. So did you find it necessary to do 3 different diagrams for Chris Kyle because of the locations of the injuries that he has?
Because of the fact that the wounds were, these drawings are 2-dimensional, and obviously a body is 3-dimensional, these diagrams allowed me to be able to get not only the front and the back, but the side as well to show the injuries.
Is this the Christopher Kyle in the condition that he was in when he came into your medical examiner's office?
Yes.
You can kind of see here, he's wearing his clothes. And this one's showing his clothing, his pants that he was brought in wearing.
Yeah, that's what we call the as-is photograph. This is the identification photograph that shows the face as well as the unique identifying number, so you can correlate who it is that you're doing the autopsy visually, their face as well as that number.
Now, on your diagram here, you have numbered the different gunshot wounds, correct?
Yes,
And you have them numbered 1 through 6 on here.
that's
Right.
correct.
Now, does your numbering system 1 through 6, does that mean anything about the order in which these injuries were received?
No, the wounds have to be separated from each other, so I could have used letters or I could have used numbers. It is strictly for identification. It doesn't reflect that what is called 1 was the first shot. 1 could have been the last shot, could have been the first shot, could have been in the middle, but
Okay.
you got to separate them out.
All right, we got to start somewhere. So let's start with what you're referring to as shot number 1. That's actually on this one down here. Let me give you the pen if you need to mark anything on here. Now, on these diagrams, Dr. Bernard, you've indicated that there's a code for entrance wound and exit wound.
Yes.
And so the solid dot means an entrance wound, and then the open circle means the exit wound.
Yes.
Okay. And so wound number 1 goes into what part of Chris Kyle?
Wound number 1 is a gunshot wound of entrance in the right side of the face, right in the jaw area. And that bullet, after going through the skin surface, then went through the oral cavity and then struck the second cervical vertebra. It caused an injury to the right side of the spinal cord, and then it exited out the back of the neck.
So that's the one that you're calling entrance number 1.
Yes.
And then stakes 268. Is that just a close-up then of that bullet wound?
Yes. That's photograph of the exit wound. What you can see is the exit wound in the back of the neck. Just above it is a small abrasion, and for these two to then be related, which they are, it requires the skin fold to be together. So in other words, if you raise your head slightly, the skin fold in this then becomes the upper part of this wound. So as the bullet exits, it's scraping the skin surface as it goes out.
Is that close up of what you were just talking about?
Yeah, it's a close up. Here's the defect where the bullet comes out. This is a scrape, so that when this bullet came out, this part of the skin was on the upper portion of the exit wound. So if you just turn your head slightly up, you have a little bit of a fold in the skin, and they then become in proximity to each other.
There's one that you've identified as wound number 2. And that appears on this diagram to be kind of in the shoulder area.
So you can see the entrance wound is on the back of the shoulder area.
And then States Exhibit 272 is that same one?
Yeah, that's a different angle. This is photograph taken from above onto the back of the shoulder.
So in this photograph, is Chris Kyle actually, he's face down.
Yes.
And over there on the very left side of the photograph, is that his head?
Yes.
Where is the exit wound for number 2?
There is no exit.
Okay. And so were you able to, we're going to look at some x-rays later, prior to doing the autopsy, did you take the x-rays of Chris Kyle while he still had his clothes on?
Yes.
And did you find some projectiles from a gun within his clothing?
Yeah. There were 2 bullets that I found in the clothing, which validates why that's a good reason to take x-rays before you get the clothes off. But within the back part of the clothing, the shirt area, there was 1 projectile that was recovered. Also in the clothing, adjacent to the exit wound for number 4, there was also a projectile. And then I could see on x-ray that there was a bullet which then correlates with wound number 2, ultimately correlates with wound number 2. And then just on the exam, you could see a bullet somewhat protruding through the partial exit of wound number 3.
For wound number 2, you said, so it doesn't have an exit wound.
No.
Can you tell the jury what was the path that bullet wound number 2 from number 2 took in his body?
After the bullet went through the shoulder area, then went into the right chest cavity. It went through the right lung, then went into the mediastinum, which is the mid portion where the heart is housed. It went through the superior vena cava, which is the large vein that brings blood back from the upper extremities as well as the head back to the heart. It went through the aorta, which is the large artery that then pumps blood to the rest of the body. It then went into the left pulmonary artery, the left bronchus, went through the left lung, and then penetrated into the left chest wall, which is where I took the bullet out.
Okay. And so, where did the bullet end up, if you can kind of point on the diagram?
Well, the bullet ends up kind of just in this general area.
Sort of the lower left abdomen.
Well, it went through the intercostal space, so it's adjacent to that. So it's going to be roughly in this area.
Now, and was the direction, I guess, when that bullet was right to left?
Right to left, it's going back to front, it's going downward.
And you had mentioned several major arteries that this bullet damaged.
Arteries and veins as well as both lungs.
Was this a fatal injury?
It's a rapidly fatal injury.
Backing up to number 1, the one on the side of his face that comes out the back of his neck, was that also a fatal injury?
Yeah, in my opinion, that's a fatal injury because the fact that it's a bullet, and as a bullet is traveling, it will release kinetic energy. And so as high as that was hitting the spinal cord, a lot of times that force goes straight up to the brainstem area and knocks out the ability to have heartbeat, respiration, things like that. So in my opinion, that's also a rapidly lethal injury.
And talking about back to number 1, the one in the face that comes out in his neck and damages the spinal cord, is that a type of injury that would have caused either paralysis or loss of the ability to stand up?
Well, again, that can be a rapidly lethal injury. But by virtue of hitting it as high, cord as high as it is, yeah, that would knock out stimulation in both the arms as well as the legs. So that wouldn't be able to maintain very well. Usually drop.
So if, and you mentioned earlier, you don't know the order of the gunshots, but if number one was the first one, is it likely that Chris Kyle would have fallen down?
I would have expected that to happen. I'd expect him to go down from that shot.
How about number two? Is that something that you could still remain standing after that one, or?
Well, the magnitude of that injury is so substantial. I mean, there's not something neurologically that would prevent you from standing, but by virtue of the degree of injuries, I would expect someone to drop pretty quickly with that.
Let's talk about 3 and 4. And on here, can you point out what part of the body is 3 and 4?
3 and 4 are 2 gunshot entrance wounds that are in the upper part of the right arm.
And
On
where?
the side portion.
So where is the exit of wound number 3?
Now, number 3 exits, and then it partially exits, and then attempts to re-enter into the right axillary or armpit area. But the bullet itself was sticking in the exit part of the arm. Because the bullet went through the humerus, the bone, it lost a lot of its energy. So it slowed down and then exited and penetrated into the axilla, but didn't go any further than just a fairly superficial penetration.
And on the same photograph that illustrates 3 and 4, are we also seeing what you're referring to as 5 and 6?
Yes, you can see those in the lower part of the photograph.
Okay. So take us through wound number 3. Where is the exit of that one? Oh, you said it came up here.
Yes.
So we've got a photograph of that. This is a close-up of 3 and 4. Is that correct?
It's a cleaned up and close-up photograph of 3 and 4.
And these are the 2 in the upper arm.
Correct.
Now, skipping ahead, is there an X-ray of that arm?
Yes, there is.
States Exhibit number 302. Does that illustrate the broken bones in that arm?
It does.
Is that a pretty thick bone in the human body?
Well, I mean, as bones go, yes, that is. I mean, it's a fairly good size, and depending on the person, the bigger the person, the bigger the humerus will be.
With this type of breaking to this bone, this humerus in his upper arm, would you expect Chris Kyle to have been able to use that arm after he'd been shot there?
Yeah, you would be able to maybe use your fingers, but as far as being able to have any purposeful control over the upper part of the arm, I would find that hard to believe. Because, in fact, both 3 and 4 went through the humerus, so it's broken in more than one area.
And that's his right arm.
Correct.
And you were talking about the how 3 and 4 went through that arm, and then I guess exited the underside of the arm.
Yes.
Is this his underarm that we're looking at here?
Yeah, this, I'm trying to laser myself here. This is the arm, if you raise the arm up. So this is the undersurface of the arm. That's the exit. Then there's a small little hole in the armpit region, and that's where the bullet tried to exit and just penetrated, so that would put the arm against or in proximity to the chest at the time that bullet tried to exit, so that it made a hole in the side.
So you're saying basically the bullet went through his upper arm, came out under his arm,
Yes.
and then kind of went back into his upper chest area.
It just penetrated superficially, yes.
Okay. And States Exhibit number 276, is that a close-up of this injury that we're seeing here, this exit wound?
Yes.
States number 277, What are we looking at here?
That is the exit of gunshot wound number 4.
So we were just looking at 3. This is number 4.
Right. 4 is the entrance you saw previously. It was just below 3. But then on the undersurface of the arm was the exit for gunshot wound number 4. And it's because of the break in the humerus, that's why it has a weird rotation to it.
Kind of twisted looking.
Yes.
Okay, we were talking about, there was that other photograph on the diagram that showed number 5 and number 6. And I keep getting ahead of myself. Number 3 and number 4, would those be considered to be fatal injuries?
Well, they're not as rapidly fatal as the others in terms of if you injure one of the brachial arteries, things like that, they could be. Certainly over time, they could be infected, but they're not rapidly fatal like these others.
So number 2 and number 1 were certainly more rapidly fatal injuries than 3 and 4 that broke his arm.
Although those are substantial injuries, but people do get operated on when they've had fractures of their arm and they survive. But it's fragmented pretty badly. But again, those are potentially fatal as compared to rapidly fatal.
Okay, number 5 and number 6. Can you describe to us number 5, and then where is our exit wound to number 5?
Now, the entrance of 5 is on the side of the right side of the chest. The entrance to 6 is on the right side of the chest, a little further behind. The exit wound for 5 is in the left side of the chest, kind of where the chest and the abdomen come together. The exit for 6 is in the flank area, so the kind of the back where the abdomen, kind of the love handle area, meets the back. It's kind of what would be the best description for it.
Not a medical term necessarily, but we all know what you're talking about when you say that. Number 5 and 6 are those depicted on State's Exhibit 278.
Yes, the entrance wounds are both seen on this exhibit.
And what was the path, the trajectory of number 5? You said it was right to left.
Well, the bullet entered from the right side. It then went briefly into the right chest cavity. It went through the right hemidiaphragm. Diaphragm is the muscle that separates the chest and the abdominal cavity. Went into the liver, went through the gallbladder, went through the stomach, went through the colon, and then it exited right, as I said before, kind of where the chest and abdomen meet together. So it's going to be right to left. It's slightly back to front and slightly downward.
And was this a rapidly fatal injury?
Yes.
State 283, I believe this is the one that you had referred to as the exit wound in the rear flank area.
Yes. That's the exit to gunshot wound number 6.
Okay. And explain to us what is the path and the trajectory that this one is taking?
This bullet entered the right side, and because of its location, it went through what we call the retroperitoneum. The retroperitoneum is that portion that's behind the abdominal cavity. So it went through the right kidney, crossed over, went through the left kidney, and then it exited out the back portion of the left flank.
So he's getting shot from the right side. All of these are from the right side to the left side.
That's correct.
Including the one in number 1 through his face.
Yes.
This is that first one. The one that came out of number 3 near the underarm.
Yes.
That's the same one. And then this is the one from number 2.
Yes, I took out the chest wall.
That's 298. 296. 297. A fairly intact, well-formed bullet.
Yes,
Not as deformed as some of the other ones.
that's correct.
300. Is this something up here?
Yes.
And what was that one?
Now that's that looks to be another projectile from what I can see, but all the bullets are accounted for. But
That's up in the side of the chest.
And then this is that one that we were just looking at in that other photograph.
Yeah, appears to be.
States Exhibit 301. This is glare on this. What part of the body is that?
That again is going to be, should be the left side, maybe flipped around, and maybe the right side. Without having enough of that, I can't really tell you very well. That may be reversed.
Is it also part of your procedure when you're doing an autopsy on someone to collect a blood sample from that person so it can be sent to a lab and compared for DNA purposes?
Well, one of the standard things is a blood card, so that there's 4 spots on it. There's a lot of DNA that's recovered out of the red blood cell. We also recover a large number of blood for toxicology testing.
And was a blood card collected on Chris Kyle?
Yes.
Also, do you collect hair and other samples?
Standards usually, unless there's something that jumps out in the hair that would be needed for trace evidence.
And so this is something that you do so somebody later can come along and have what they call a known sample of this person's DNA or whatever type of tissue that they need.
Well, yeah, it's got hair if it needs to be compared. It may have roots if you need DNA, but with the blood card, you've got all the DNA material really you need.
And do you do fingerprints as well?
We do fingerprint, yes.
Now let's move on, Dr. Bernard, and talk about your autopsy of Chad Littlefield. What did you notice about Chad Littlefield when you performed just the external examination?
Well, that he also had a large number of gunshot wounds as well.
Just some basics about Chad Littlefield. How tall was he and what did he weigh?
6 foot, 230 pounds.
Now you note things. I don't know if I mentioned this over when we were talking about Chris. You mentioned in Chad's report, did he have some earplugs in both ears?
He did.
And did Chris also have earplugs in both of his ears?
In the right ear.
In the right ear. Did you notice any other signs of injury or medical problems that Chad Littlefield had, other than these gunshot wounds?
No.
And did you do a toxicology screen of blood and other bodily fluids on Chad Littlefield?
Yes.
And did he have any kind of drugs or alcohol in his system?
No.
And how many gunshot wounds did you count on Chad Littlefield?
7.
Is that a photograph of Chad Littlefield as he came in?
Yes, that's the upper half of the as is photograph.
That is moved up a little bit, see his lower half. It shows his clothing.
Yeah.
Correct, this is States Exhibit 237.
This is the lower half of the shoes on the identifying number. This is the identifying photograph that we take with the individual's face as well as the unique number.
Okay, as you did with Chris Kyle's autopsy, did you also number these bullet wounds that you found on Chad Littlefield?
I did.
And again, as with Chris Kyle, the numbering that you assigned to them does not indicate the order of the bullets.
That's correct.
This is just for your purposes, so you keep track of the different wounds.
Yeah, and frankly, it was you start at the top and work your way down. That's what the numbering I did.
Okay, so let's talk about the one that you have labeled as bullet wound number 1. Describe to us what area of the body that's in.
Yeah, gunshot wound number 1, the entrance is in the top of the head, very slightly to the right of the midline. That bullet went in through the skull, went into the right side of the brain, went into the left side of the brain, and then exited out the back of the skull, and then ultimately exited out the back of the head.
Can you just use me as an example and point to me to show the jury what part of the head is this on?
This would be on the top of the head, slightly to the right of the center, and then the exit wound is in the back of the head to the left of the center.
Just kind of point out.
So it's a front to back, it's a right to left and downward trajectory.
Does this show the location of that bullet wound number 1.
Yes, it does.
This is in the top of Chad's head.
That's correct.
Now, obviously, you are the one that shaved his head.
Yes,
Is that a close up of that bullet wound?
it is.
And that's an entrance wound in the top of the head.
It is. All right.
Makes sense.
Number 2 is an entrance wound to the left side of the face, to the left of the nose, that goes through the maxillary sinus, which is kind of the cheek area, the front part. It then goes into the left side of the neck muscle, down into the shoulder and upper back area, and exits out like I said, the left back and shoulder area. To the side of the nose, and then it goes through the sinus, and then heads through down into the musculature of the neck, and then out.
This is a close up of that bullet wound number 2.
Yes,
Right there beside his nose and under his eye.
yes. Now, 244 is a photograph of the exit wound of gunshot wound number 2.
Bullet number 1, was that a rapidly fatal injury?
Yeah, it was rapidly fatal. There are contusions of the brain. It goes through portions of the brain that are not survivable. There are multiple skull fractures. In fact, there's skull fractures of the orbital plates, which could also be associated with 2. But there are fractures that are clearly associated with 1, with contusions or hemorrhages along the bullet track of 1. It's a rapidly fatal injury.
Bullet wound number 2, was that a rapidly fatal injury?
Well, when you take into account that you've got skull fractures, you got a little bit of blue discoloration around the eye, that probably some of the orbital plate fractures are not just related to the top, then it certainly could be lethal, but certainly less so than 1.
Now, let's talk about number 3. You've got it marked here on this diagram, being to the back of the head.
So the entrance is to the back, the exit is to the right side of the neck.
So it originates in the back of the head and then it originates in the back of the neck.
Exits in the back side. Yes, I'm sorry. It exits in the back of the right side.
Enters and exits in the back of the head and neck.
Yes.
Again, you've shaved Chad's head to show these wounds.
Yes.
Now, are we looking at 2 different injuries in this?
Yeah, you're looking at exit for gunshot wound number 1.
So this is the one we were just talking about, when at the top of his head, it came out the back of his head there.
That's correct.
And then number
This is the
3.
entrance to number 3, and that's the exit to number 3.
So this is the entrance,
Yes,
number 3, and then the exit is over here.
that's correct.
Is that a close-up of those 2 injuries that we were just talking about?
Yeah, that's a close-up of exit to gunshot wound number 1 and entrance to gunshot wound number 3.
Is that showing us that exit wound on number 3?
It is.
So again, this would be the entrance, and then
Correct.
this is the exit.
Correct.
This is a close-up of this injury, the exit wound,
That's correct.
to number 3 of his neck.
That's the exit, yes.
Is that a close-up of what we were able to see in that full body photograph?
Yes. Yeah, it covers the same area that you can see in the broader picture.
And what numbers have you assigned to these injuries?
There is the entrance to 4, which is an irregular entrance wound, and the exit to number 4. And then you also can see the exit to number 5.
So let's talk about number 4. The entrance is where? Right here at the top of the shoulder, it appears to be.
It is
And then comes out
slightly lower.
slightly below it. And then number 5. Now, we're looking at on this photograph and here on this diagram, this is an exit wound to number 5. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So where's the entrance wound to number 5?
In the right back.
Right over here.
Yes, that's correct.
Was this again a close up of number 4, state 251,
It is.
and 252 also close up of the wound associated with number 4.
That's correct.
Now, is number 4 a rapidly fatal injury?
No.
Okay, we're talking about number 5. States 253. We're looking at Chad's back here.
Yes.
Now we see actually how many injuries on his back.
Right. You can see entrance to gunshot wound number 5, entrance to gunshot wound number 6, and then up here you can kind of see a part of the exit wound of gunshot wound number 2. The main focus of this photograph was entrance 5, entrance 6.
So number 5.
Number 5 is to the right of midline, so that's correct.
When you say midline, you're just talking about your backbone. And now, is this one here what you're referring to as gunshot wound number 6?
It is.
Is that a close-up of number 5 and number 6?
Yes.
Where is the exit of state of 5?
Number
So-
5. Number 5 is in the right anterior chest and the front part of the chest.
What kind of organ damage did number 5 do to Chad?
After the bullet entered into the right chest, went through the back, went into the right chest, went through the lower lobe of the right lung, the upper lobe of the right lung, and exited the front of the right side of the chest.
And you may have said it, but I've forgotten this 5 a rapidly fatal injury.
Yes,
Would this have caused massive internal bleeding?
and did.
And then number 6, where is its exit?
6's exit wound is in the front part of the chest as well. After the bullet entered the left mid back, it went through the 6th thoracic vertebra, went through the spinal cord, went into the mediastinum, went through the superior vena cava. It then went into the right chest cavity through the right lung, and then out from the right side of the chest.
This be a rapidly fatal injury.
Yes.
Well, these are our exit wounds. Is that correct?
Yes.
Which one, 5 or 6?
5 and 6. So you have 5 and there's 6.
So this is the exit of 5, and this is the exit of 6.
That's correct.
And state's exhibit number 257 is that a close-up wound of the exit of number 5.
Yes.
Wound number 7, what part of the body is that in?
Now, the wound number 7 is a gunshot wound entrance exit complex of the left hand that enters to the back part of the hand and goes out the front part of the hand when you have the hand with the palm facing out. That would be the standard anatomic position.
In state's exhibit number 258, the photograph of
That's the entrance wound.
number 7.
That's the entrance.
Is this the exit wound in Chad's hand of number 7?
Yes.
And you're all past the list.
You're an expert regarding evaluations of scientific information, but you're not trying to tell the jury to testify and determine the position of the shooter versus the position of the person who was shot. Is that fair to say?
Other than in certain hypothetical situations, certain things would be consistent with it, others may not. As to saying what the specific positions during this shooting, no, I couldn't tell you exactly what positions they were in.
That's all I had. Thank you. Have a safe evening.
I have no further questions for Dr. Bernard.
You may be further excused, Your Honor.